Welcome, everyone, to the SnapCast podcast with your hosts, Brad O'Brien and Mike Cooley. This is what, episode 59?
60.
60? This is 60? Holy, where does the time go? If this is your first time joining us and you're wondering what the hell did I just dial into, this is a Magic the Gathering podcast where we talk about MTG and MTG-related things.
Mostly.
We're a podcast that's geared towards the casual Magic player with a very, very, very competitive interest in MTG finance. What's up, fellas? How's everybody doing?
I'm doing all right. As always, I was feeling a little bit sluggish by the end of the day today, and now we've started this podcast, and I feel great.
It's its own therapy session, man. I love talking about this stuff with you every week. I look forward to it, brother, for sure.
It might be the cocktail, because I haven't,
Very well could be.
I worked today. I didn't have a cocktail during the day, so that might be why I'm in a better mood now than I have been all day, but it could be the company.
That's what I'm going to chalk it up to.
Honestly, I think that's what it is. I spend so much damn time alone nowadays, working from home and limiting my extracurricular activities still. We've got it really good here in Maine with the pandemic, such as it were. Our numbers have pretty much stayed low the whole time. So I haven't really feared for my life, but I also haven't been out. I'm not looking to F around and find out.
Right. We're not really just out there. There's things have been closed down for the longest time. You know what I mean?
Going on a year.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
You know what's crazy?
What's crazy?
Starting Magic the Gathering podcast like 2.5 months before the world shuts down and they stop having tournaments and nobody's playing in paper and we're trying to figure out card values.
We had our work cut out for us from day one. But the good thing is you almost can't miss in there, right? Like, you become March, you're like, all right, you pick a Magic card, it'll probably go up in price. And, that's kind of what we've seen. We've seen a lot of spikes in Magic card prices. We've seen a lot of turmoil in the game of Magic. And speaking of which, one of the big things, if you're really tuned into the game, you really, you're always watching for changes. There has been a B&R, good old banned and restricted announcement, just as of recently, as of this week. And man, it was a big one.
I'll tell you what, it really was. Who knew that Gate Crash actually had playable cards in it that were going to end up being banned in formats that nobody actually plays? I think it's fitting that a set that nobody really cared about or played has cards in it that are now being banned in a format that nobody really cares
which
about.
Which one was from Gate Crash? Was it Balustrade Spy?
Balustrade Spy and Undercity Informer.
Oh my God. Yeah, the set that everybody counted out right here.
Which just goes to show you, if you want to talk about MTG paying dividends, if you manage to hold on to all your bulk for years, eventually there's a diamond in the rough.
Somewhere, man. Somewhere. I did that with Serum Visions. Well, I bulked Serum Visions once. Did I tell you about that? I had this was in the grand days of Modern when Ponder was legal and Preordain was legal. And I was like, well, this card, Serum Visions, really sucks. No one's using that. And then they banned literally every other Scry card except for Serum Visions. And that card went to like $6 or $8. And I was like, man, I don't even want to think about how many of those I bulked. I remember bulking them. It's crazy. Just like you said, though. Eventually, diamond in the rough. All of them.
There are no bad specs. They're just longer time horizons. We can talk about these sort of. Let's go format reverse chronologically. So we'll go from the newer formats to the older formats.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
That's how they presented it in the B&R. But definitely, we're gonna take our time going through this because, one, we want to talk about what does this mean for these cards? What does it mean for the format? As best as we can come up with it for casual players with a competitive interest in finance. So the first thing, and one thing that I will point out is they did just release the newest set, and and of course I didn't get the date for this, but I want to say it was the Friday before, like 9 days or something. I think the newest set, Kaldheim, came out officially in paper 9 days before this ban and restricted announcement. That's kind of interesting.
Really is, especially when you see some of the cards that are axed in this.
But like in previous years, all of those cards were available in the online clients in the weeks leading up to it. So even though this new set has only been impacting these formats for technically a week, really it's almost 3 weeks. And the online metagame changes over so fast. So many games get played on Arena and on Moto that it's amazing how much information they get in a short amount of time.
Well, and it's Magic AIDS was also talking about this on his channel recently about everything is online now. All of the games and the data that you get is from all from online players. There used to be kind of a negative feedback loop where the pro players that played at the tabletop Magic and these big events wouldn't use these random new cards that people would throw in decks, but now you see that happening. You see these rogue versions of decks actually just being entered in big tournaments and taking them down, like these newer decks that might not be so tried and true, taking things down because everybody's got a shot,
So what that makes me want to bring up something, and I actually like this. This is probably one of my favorite things about the cast. It's show Cooley something new. Have you ever heard of untapped.gg?
I feel like you've brought it up to me before.
Have I?
Is it where you can you can basically build your deck, draw your cards?
Nope. So
nope. Okay.
Untapped.gg is a arena. It's sort of a smart arena add-on that looks at your deck, follows your gameplay, and gives you stats based on the win rate for the deck, how many matches you've played. So they show it here, average duration of games played. So you can see your entire deck list.
Yep.
And a list of all your opponent's revealed cards on the screen. You get draw percentages on screen. So when you're playing to outs, you can be like, okay, I have a 60% chance to get the card that I need if I make this risky maneuver.
Right.
And that's what the pro players do. Is they're like, it's like a poker player. They're not playing because they fear the board. They're playing because they know what the odds are that they are going to get that card.
Right.
And unlike me, when they don't, they're okay with it because that's just statistics. Me, when I don't draw the damn card that I need, I smash a keyboard or a wireless mouse or something stupid.
No, I have heard about this before, though. My buddy Mike, who made it into the Mythic qualifier, uses this.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was showing me all of that stuff on screen. I had seen it before. I just didn't know what it was called.
A lot.
It's really helpful,
competitor
though.
players love this data, and that's what it is. It's just more data.
Yep. Oh, it's really good, man. Just being able to show you that stuff. It's like borderline.
Cheating?
I mean, borderline, right? Like, it's right on the cusp. It's right on the cusp. I mean, just telling you what your opponent has revealed. It's like instantly taking notes for you. You could never do that tabletop. You remember when people used to take they'd be like, oh, let me thought seize you. Do you guys remember this? Thought seize.
Let me write this down.
And then they'd pull out their notepad and write down everything in your hand, especially on turn one. You've got like 7 cards in your hand. They all got different names, and he's sitting there just writing them down. Oh, that was such a pain. But this does it instantly for you. Bam, like, yep, this card is revealed. And from there, you can you'll always have them at your disposal right there. You'll know it.
Right, you're not going to forget. You're not going to ignore it.
God, that's so nuts. That's so nuts.
And so the reason why I bring that up is the first format that was impacted that we're going to talk about is Historic. What got banned in Historic, Mike?
Oh my gosh, I say good riddance to Uro. Can I tell you a quick story about how much I hate Uro in Historic? So, to piggyback off Mike, who had this untapped.gg thing that I didn't know what it was called, I was sitting over his shoulder watching him play at the Mythic qualifier, and I was upset. I remember being more upset than he was. Like, he was kind of sitting there. He didn't know what to expect. He's like, whatever, man. If we flunk out, whatever, we made it. You know what I mean? I was so pissed watching the games, because 3 games that he lost back to back were literally, and he was debating me on this. I was like, no, I'm right. This is an absolute shit deck that has 4 Uros in it. This deck sucks. You lost to Uro. You lost to your opponent drawing an Uro, and there literally being no efficient answers to it in this format. And especially even if you do answer it, oh, here's another one. Like, it's so ridiculous. I was like, this card is a deck. This is the deck. The card is greater than the deck itself at this point. I mean, so many different variations of it, too. It was just, they should have called them all Uro. They tried to get creative and call them, oh, this style Uro deck. No, it's Uro.deck is what all of them should be called, because the card was greater than any deck that it usually was found in.
Well,
good riddance.
And we'll get to it. We'll get to it later. But yes, there were absolute. It just became a card that people, and you can tell me, because I know that there are examples like this in Vintage and Legacy where it's just like, okay, this card doesn't belong in the color identity of this deck, but we're going to shoehorn it in because it doesn't matter. You have to play this card. You know, if it's a green card and you're playing black-red, you're going to put green in your deck for this card.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you can see it in a lot of cards, man. Like, look at Oko. Look at, like, in Vintage, what's his name? Dak Faden. Like, red was kind of an odd color to put in Vintage. Like, it's a format where Lightning Bolt is actually not good. You know what I mean? And to get red in there was odd. And people made it happen. They're just like, yep, Dak Faden's too good not to throw in here. Yep.
Yeah. So Uro got forced into a lot of decks. So Uro and Omnath, Locus of Creation, banned in Historic. What I've heard from some people is they're a little afraid that this just means that Goblins is going to run amok. But Goblins is pretty fragile, and what this unbans are mid-range decks. Because you can't out mid-range Omnath and you can't out mid-range Uro. The value that those two cards create, and they were almost always played together, is impossible to surmount with, you know, a couple of board wipes, a counter spell, and a closer.
Right.
Like you can't beat Omnath or Uro with a mid-range pile.
Right. Well, I mean, that's exactly what mid-range is trying to do. They're trying to out-card advantage you, and when you have a busted card that does everything you could ever want, and there's literally no way to out-card advantage that card,
then you can't play mid-range.
You can't play mid-range against it. Like, they always win. Like, our Uro always beats the mid-range. It's like, oh, what are you going to do? Kill it? What are you going to do? Are you going to thought seize it out of me? What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Nothing. Are you going to counter it? It's just so laughable at how little answers there were to that. Like, 2-step answers. You had to get it in the grave, and then you had to somehow exile it, and then hope they don't have another one to follow it up with. Like, ridiculous. That card was great.
So ridiculous, in fact, that it was also banned in the next format that we're going to talk about, going further back in time. What's the next format?
Pioneer, man. This thing gets the boot in Pioneer.
Yeah, Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath, also banned in Pioneer, along with the 2 cards that we mentioned earlier, laughingly, that, you know, the 2 unsung heroes of Gatecrash, apparently, Balustrade Spy and Undercity Informer, that made the Oops All Spells deck possible in Pioneer.
That's so nuts to me. That's so nuts that deck was... I mean, I have recently become a fan of it, and to think that it was viable in Pioneer just blows my mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they can those cards for obvious reasons. It's not really a fun deck to play against, for sure, but it's something you would expect in, like, you know, eternal formats such as Legacy or Vintage. You expect that kind of unfair, dumb stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You expect Mana Dredge and Oops All Spells.
Oh, right. Like, you know, oh, that's not out of the ordinary in this format, but in Pioneer, it just kind of breaks the wheel of, like, a regular gameplay, and it's odd. It's just not fun to play against. But, you know, speaking of cards not fun to play against, you want to know what else was banned in Pioneer?
A card that I absolutely love to hate.
Yeah, absolutely. You love to hate this card. Teferi Time Raveler. This card, we've talked about it for a while. I mean,
we bring it up every other month or so.
Exactly. I mean, this card, as soon as it was printed, we were like, I don't think people realize how many things this answers, like how many problems this solves right here on one card. And now I'm thinking they're beginning to understand this card solves a lot of problems and does it in a very demoralizing way.
And that's it. So we aren't really talking about the thinking behind all of these, but one of the things that they do say in the release notes of this announcement is that they're taking this opportunity to ban Teferi and Wilderness Reclamation from Pioneer as cards that previously overstayed their welcome in Standard. They were saying that they knew that this was a little too powerful even in Standard, and people that are trying to go Standard Plus with Historic and Pioneer are not liking it any more than they did before because it is demoralizing. You're holding up this spell to play on your opponent's turn, and if it's not a counter spell that counters Teferi, it was worthless.
Right. And not to mention the fact that it takes creativity out of the format, I think. That's the thing about Teferi Time Raveler. It takes the creativity out of the format. It's sort of what I was talking about, where I don't think people understand all of the problems that this solves in a very demoralizing way. Like my constant review.
I don't have to worry about you anymore.
Right.
I can do whatever on my turn.
I don't have to worry about your cascade. I don't have to worry about your cheating of casting spells. Like, I don't have to even worry about you interacting with anything I do. You know what I mean? It's a ridiculous card. Ridiculous card.
I recently played an EDH game where somebody just, like, turn 3 Teferi plus, goes around the board, comes back to that person, Teferi plus, goes back around the board. on the last person's end step, Wrath of God, and everybody's like, excuse me? I plussed on Teferi, so my sorceries have flash.
My God.
And nobody plays around sorcery speed spells, like, even when they know that card's in play. It's sort of like how many people have tried to draw a card with a Narset Parter Avails on the board. If somebody just Teferis and pluses it, they don't touch anything else, they don't bounce anything else on the board.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, whatever, it's just a 3 mana.
And even if you were prepared, right? Even if you were like, all right.
You can't respond.
You can't respond to it. You can't respond. You can't, I mean, think of all the stuff this card says, right? I mean, sure, it's just one simple little line of text, right? Technically, it reads, each opponent can cast spells only anytime they could cast a sorcery, right? Classic Teferi, the original Teferi, right? But I remember how demoralizing that original Teferi was. It was like, I had all of these crazy decks, and my buddy in Commander was running this stupid Teferi at 5 mana. I was like, I gotta race him to 5 mana, because when he gets that out, I can't play Magic.
Yeah.
But now, here you go at 3 mana, right? Think of all the stuff it says. Opponents can't play spells on your turn. Your spells are uncounterable. It says your opponents can't do tricky things that cast spells, such as Cascade or Bring to Light, or, you know what I mean?
Or get their spell out from under a spell queller.
Exactly, man.
Or cast the second spell off of Tybalt's Trickery.
Or suspend.
Oh,
no suspend. It breaks.
There's a
that
trigger
down.
on the stack. Sorry.
Yep.
Even if it was a sorcery speed spell, there's a trigger on the stack and you can't respond to it.
Yep, exactly. It's so bad, man.
WotC said that they felt like Teferi Time Raveler was keeping Wilderness Rec in check. So when they banned Teferi, they also banned Wilderness Reclamation. I will tell you, I was so sad. This is probably the most sad I was about one of the bannings, because I just recently heard about somebody using the new card from Kaldheim, the World Tree, with Wilderness Reclamation. The World Tree says, as long as you have 6 or more lands, all your lands are rainbow lands. Yep. And it comes into play tapped. So if you play Wilderness Rec on 4 or 5, and you play the World Tree, and it comes in tapped, the Wilderness Reclamation trigger goes on the stack. You can float 5 of any mana, untap your World Tree, Tap 6 and activate the World Tree to sacrifice it and go bring any number of God cards from your deck into play.
That's so stupid. That's so stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, Wilderness Reclamation has made for some very unfun gameplay as well. You know what I mean?
It has, but once it's on the board, you know that person is trying to interact with big mana at the end of, at their end step.
Right.
So once it's in play in a constructed format or a 60 card format, yes, it sucks. It's not it's definitely another demoralizing card because you have somebody that's suddenly casting 9 mana spells with 4 or 5 lands in play.
Right. Well, I think it goes even deeper than that too, right? Like, because of the fact that it comes out and immediately takes effect.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you
it pays for itself, it's free.
It pays for itself. It's immediately you untap your lands basically, and if you have instant spells, you got yourself a Collected Company. I don't know who would throw those two cards in the deck together, but if you have some sort of instant speed spell, which I'm sure your deck is full of them, you can do it right then. Like, there's no wait. There's no wait time. There's no hey, by the way, I'm playing this and you have a turn to respond. It's like, bam, slam it, and now I get another turn on my end step. It's always been demoralizing in my mind.
Here's an interesting thing, though. So far, we've talked about 2 bannings in Historic and 5 bannings in Pioneer. So 7 total cards banned. 2 of those were printed in Gatecrash. The rest have all been printed in the last 2 or 3 years.
Oh, yeah.
What do they all have in common? Omnath comes into play, draws a card, landfall, does a bunch of stuff. Uro comes into play, gain 3 life, draw a card, put a land into play. Teferi Time Raveler immediately comes into play. Once it resolves, your opponents can't cast spells except for his sorceries. Wilderness Reclamation comes in, untaps all your lands at your end step. All of these have immediate effects.
Exactly.
None of these cards are. And even so, Balustrade Spy and Undercity Informer, when they come in,
you can use them.
You can use them. And they immediately do their thing. There's no more, see you on my turn.
Right.
On my turn, I'm going to do the coolest thing ever. No, you don't have time for that.
Counter it or die, basically. Yeah. It's rough. Those are rough cards to play against, man. But also, I wonder if it's going to be a wake-up call for Wizards to stop with the ridiculous power creep of immediate, this sort of like a immediate payoff for cards that you play at very cheap mana costs.
Or cards that just reward you for playing Magic, playing lands like Omnath, like Wilderness Reclamation,
Yeah.
That just, you're going to go about your game and... Uro even. You're going to end up with cards in your graveyard if you're playing Magic.
Yeah. I mean, the power creep is real, man. It really is. In fact, and we'll probably talk about this more in a moment, but I was looking at vintage lists recently. It blew my mind. You used to see this every once in a while in a blue moon in vintage, where people started getting efficient with their moxes. And this is what I mean. Look at vintage 10 years ago. Even 5 years ago, you had the Power 9 in your deck. There was no question about it. And you had just about every single one of them. Maybe you had the Power 8. Maybe you didn't run Time Twister.
Yeah.
But you had every other Power 9 card in your deck, right? Now, they're taking the off-color moxes out of their decks. And it's not just like a one-off deck here and there. The top finishing decks are taking out the off-color moxen in their deck, which I find...
Because the new cards are powerful enough.
Yeah, it's just like, what do I need this off-color mox for? Sure, it's a free mana, but guess what? The power level of all of these other cards, Force of Negation, Force of Will, Oko, Thief of Crowns, Narset, Parter of Veils. Like, I don't need these other cards to, I just don't need these off-color rocks for zero anymore. Yeah. Like, blows my mind that so many are becoming way more efficient with the moxen that they're using. It really suggests that the power creep is getting real, where you would rather have cards printed in the last few years than a 0-drop mana spell.
I know that right now people are excited about opportunities to play in Pioneer not having to deal with Teferi, this unbans your instance. They're not playing against the oops all spell decks. Maybe you don't have to have 4 cards that deal with graveyards. You don't have to have a big chunk of your sideboard taken up by that stuff. So they are definitely giving the opportunity for some interesting gameplay for a little while.
Yeah.
The question is, thinking about Omnath was just in Zendikar Rising, or Uro was just in Theros Beyond Death. What's the Teferi was War of the Spark, which seems like a long time ago, but that was just last fall. That's not quite a year ago, I don't think.
Nope.
Wilderness Reclamation, same thing.
Yeah.
Like, what's in Kaldheim that is going to go within a year?
Right. I mean, it's very true. I mean, what do they do? What does Wizards of the Coast do from here? They just keep printing busted cards and we'll ban them when we ban them. We don't care how long this ban list is.
This is the third. I heard on another podcast recently that this is the third largest single ban list ever, but that's also including like the initial. That's like the Mirrodin ban list and the initial Modern ban list.
Wow, that's insane. That's insane. Yeah, this is a huge ban list. I mean, we're just through the first 2 formats. There's like five formats represented on this ban list. So moving on to the next format.
My favorite format.
My favorite format as well, Modern. I think the healthiest format in Magic the Gathering right now, Modern. Are you surprised at any of these bans here?
Two cards on here surprised me. So let's talk about them in the order that they're printed.
Yeah.
Field of the Dead didn't surprise me. This was a card that let people just play lands and was nigh impossible to beat either as a control player or as a control player. Because once this is on the battlefield, if you're not a dedicated land D deck, somebody just has to play their lands and make dudes.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a bad top deck at that point, right? Like, no matter what, you get a 2/2. Like, or you get some powerful spell that you've packed in your deck and have planned on, Speaking of making lands not bad top decks, when your Flooded Strand turns into a Cryptic Command, that turns into a Cryptic Command loop, nobody wants to play against the demoralizing Mystic Sanctuary loops. And that one is gone. Yeah, Mystic Sanctuary was the first time I ever figured out how that worked. I was like, wait, what? That's so stupid. I was like, You're kidding me. You can just keep doing this. You can just keep getting your Cryptic back. This game's over. This is like a soft lock.
Yeah.
I mean, this is stupid. Yeah, I'm glad. I'm so happy to see that go, honestly. Because, again, it goes back to what we talk about. One of the things why Wizards bans cards, they stop people from playing their spells. Like, people just want to play their spells in this game.
Yeah.
And if you have, like, a Cryptic Command...
If you don't get to play the game...
Yeah, it's not fun. If people aren't having fun, they're not buying your cards.
Yeah. Now, the next 2 are the 2 that surprised me. 1, Shock the Monkey, Simeon's Spirit Guide, going the way of Mox Opal.
Yuck.
Fast mana's gotta go.
Yuck.
Simeon's Spirit Guide was never in a fair deck. let's be honest. Get this monkey off my back. So here's the thing. I don't feel bad that it was banned, but it has been in the format for so long that I really am surprised that they took this opportunity to take it off the ban list, especially when the next card and a rules change that they made really took the newest heat off of this card.
Right.
So the next one on here is Tibalt's Trickery. We've talked about that weird counterspell interaction that then goes into a player's library and casts a card. Players were using Simeon's Spirit Guide to rush out something like a Demonic Dread or some other Cascade card ahead of plan to cascade into Valky God of Lies.
Yep.
Cutting to the bottom of this thing, they changed the rules. You can't do that anymore. You can't cascade into the 7 mana side of Valky God of Lies.
Right.
So why did Simeon Spirit Guide have to go? The only deck that really ran that was Adnaz at that point.
Yeah. It was surprising to me because it's sort of the unsung hero that might be the wrong terminology for it. It's like they snuck it in. You know what I mean? Like, it's easy to overlook this card when you look at all the other ones that are on this list. And why it was surprising to me, what it made me think of, is how many cards did you ban before that when that was probably the one you should have got? And how many cards may come off the ban list now that fast mana is what they're actually targeting in Modern? You know what I mean? What about the Rite of Flame? Does that come off now? Like, is there a realm in which that might come off? Or maybe, just maybe some of the other fast mana cards that actually cost mana? You know what I mean? Do those come off now? Or is there a realm in which we can theorize that?
See, I don't know. Like, Mox Opal's problem for me was that it just stayed in play, and it was free mana. Simeon Spirit Guide went away. It's like a red Mox.
Yeah.
Like, or a Lotus
Petal, yeah.
Lotus Petal. You just sack it, it's gone. You don't get to use it again. I'm okay with that. So, yeah. I don't know. And Tybalt's Trickery is banned, and that's the other one that surprised me because, one, the whole in 100% glass cannon Tybalt's Trickery deck had already fallen out of favor in the first week and a half. It was cute, but it lost to any single piece of interaction whatsoever.
Yeah.
And everybody learned that all they had to do was counter the Trickery. Like, I'll let you Cascade, and then you go to cast Trickery on your Cascade spell, and I'll counter that. Or, I'll say that, creatures can't enter the battlefield with a what's the 1 mana Graveyard Hate artifact?
Grafdigger's Cage.
Grafdigger's Cage or something.
Yep.
I'm
not
I
sure.
don't know, because you actually play the card from exile, so
Yeah.
Grafdigger's Cage might not have gotten around it.
But still, like,
But
it
had already fallen
cute.
out.
Yeah.
And so why ban that now when you've changed the Cascade rule already, or you were going to change the Cascade rule? Would you ban a cute card from your most recent set? I don't know if they were just trying to set a record for the fastest a card went from legal in paper to banning.
It was legal for 5 minutes and gone. Yeah, I mean, so you know what I think might have had a lot to do with that is there was a picture that I believe you shared with me that was circulating the internet, which was somebody who played in a modern PTQ, I believe, and they lost to a turn 1 Tybalt through a Force of Negation.
Yeah.
So this guy just goes turn 1, land, Simeon Spirit Guide, bam, pukes his hand, and his final 2 cards that he has are Force of Negation and another blue card. So he fights his, something.
Yeah.
Like, it's something to fight the counter war with. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I just lost to this through a Force of Negation on turn 1. And I think they probably got smart and looked at it for what it was and said, okay, like, it might be time for Simeon Spirit Guide to go. Because it's, like you said, it's never in a fair deck.
So 5 cards banned in Pioneer, also 5 cards banned in Modern. And one of them we've talked about already in Pioneer and Historic, and that's Uro Titans of Nature's Wrath.
Glad to see it go in Modern, too.
Okay, so here I want to digress a little bit. We have been a fan of Oko Thief of Crowns since it came out. And that card suffered a ban in Standard, and then later on a ban in Modern. And, maybe something else we'll talk about in a minute. But for those of you on YouTube that are watching, I went over to Echo MTG to show you the price graph here is the card, and it's spiking, and then it's banned in Standard, and it's plummet. But then people realized it's still a really good card in Modern. And then it was banned, and then it plummeted.
Yeah.
So this was a card that, went between $35 and $33. When it was legal in Standard, it went up to $60, down to $33, up to $50. And then after that ban,
Down to $8 at one
Down
point
to
for the
$8 at
regular
one
one.
point.
Yeah.
Which that card has crept up now to almost $20 since last November. So in November it was banned in standard, in January or something it was banned in modern, and it dropped down to $8 and has crept up to a little over 20. Why do I mention that?
Well, there must have been another banning of this card.
Well, no. So I'm trying to make the comparison to Uro.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yep.
Uro now has been banned in historic, which
Yep.
doesn't matter for paper cards. Pioneer, which I would argue right now doesn't matter for paper cards.
Definitely.
Modern, it was banned in, barely matters for paper cards right now.
Right. But there's definitely a player base of paper card players in Modern. I mean, ourselves included, and a lot of other people out there.
So, like, looking at an extended art Uro, which is arguably, the coolest version to have, if that right now is $50, we haven't seen really the price retraction that much since the banning. Because the banning just happened. So here's February 16th. The foil dropped from $219 to $190. So the foil has already dumped.
Yep.
We're going to see this go down. Are we going to see this go down to $20, to $10?
I would argue we should. You know what I mean? It makes sense. We should. Here's the thing. And this is what we're seeing with Oko. You eventually run out of formats that a card is viable in, the more it gets banned. You know what I mean? Like, you can't play it in...
Oh, there's a lesson.
Oof.
That's the regular box version.
Ooh.
Look at how quickly that drops off.
Yeah.
So there's ban day. According to this, that's before the ban. So that's interesting. I don't know about
there was some insider trading there. Some insider trading. By the way, what's up, Brady? Brady says there's no way this is getting to down to the $15 range.
No
it's
way
almost
the
there.
full art gets down to 15.
Oh, the full art for damn sure probably won't. I should say my best guess there was for the regular version. I think that gets even lower.
But if the regular version goes from 40 to 20, and this card is now only playable in EDH.
In Legacy, technically.
In Legacy, technically.
But that doesn't drive
for
the
a
price
minute.
of cards.
And it doesn't drive the price of cards because most people playing Legacy are playing online too.
Right.
So even if it's just cut in half, if this goes from 50 to 25, is it a buy? Because after a year of EDH play, does it go back up to 50?
I think for sure it does. And here's why. And again, I think we're going to have to say this, okay? And I'm going to really stress this as we spec on Uro after the banning. And that is, my suggestion here is based on the fact that this does not catch any more bannings in a format such as Commander. Because think of how good this is in Commander, right? Just think for a minute. Like, you thought Uro was a pain in the ass in all of these other formats, right? Imagine a format he could be the commander in, where you always have access to him. And guess what? If the way that the rules work, you play him, he goes to the grave. If they frig your graveyard up, they blow out your graveyard.
He goes back to the command
turn him right back to the command zone. That is arguably even more demoralizing. So I would say this is one you want to keep your eyes on. I mean, I think it will probably go down more. And if it does, if it hits that Oko range, right? Like, it's definitely a snap this up for sure. Like, if it gets
interesting.
down,
I looked at regular art Oko here. Let's just look at the borderless. And sort of around that same. Look at this. So you see the standard banning, the modern banning.
damn,
That foil jumped up. Somebody realized
this is still a good
here in
card.
October, this is still a good card. And that foil spiked right up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just think of what this thing does, dude. Like, do you ever hate seeing Oko in any format you're playing?
It depends on what side of the battlefield it's on.
Right.
But let's talk about let's talk about Oko because there were also bans in Legacy,
Yeah. Now,
including.
yeah, exactly. And including Oko. I think even in Legacy, this is a big statement for this card. This is a really big statement when something is banned in Legacy. It's also a statement that Legacy does not dictate prices of cards at all, because this was banned in Legacy and the price of it didn't really get affected as much nearly as, the other formats that had banned it.
Well, it's just a matter of time.
Yeah,
Just a matter of time.
For sure. I mean, it's like I said, people are running out of formats to play this card in, right? Like, you now have Vintage and Commander. And when you're looking at all the busted Planeswalkers ever printed, I don't think especially you can cast with Black Lotus, people aren't playing a lot of Oko and Vintage right now. There's just not really So you have one format, essentially, you can play it in. And it's still pretty busted there. Every deck that can
feels bad to have your Commander elked.
Oh man, every deck that I run in Commander that has colors blue-green in it for sure has an Oko in it, because has there really ever been a better Planeswalker printed in blue-green? Or really even think of cards in general. Have there ever really been more powerful cards that can deal with so much shit than Oko?
I'm looking at you, Uro.
Even Uro, right? Like, I think they're very similar in power level, Oko and Uro. Oko, like you said, it feels bad to get your Commander elked. It feels bad to have a cheaty face deck that just wants to bust your opponent down with big stompers. And the +1 ability on this damn Planeswalker, it elks your dude. Yep. It doesn't even cost him anything. It's so demoralizing to play against, but you're running out of formats for it is the thing, after this banning in Legacy.
So this is another one that I would say watch Oko for another tank over like the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And, if you don't have one, it'll be a good time to get one for EDH.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say the same thing, more certainly too for Uro, is when that goes down, keep your eye on it.
Well, and I'll put it back up on the screen just because I want people to see is that you can track this price movement. Sort of, you see where it drops or as it spikes in playability in a format and then gets banned. So when you see this increase, people are taking interest in the card's seeing play, it's being successful, it gets banned, it goes down, people are like, there's no way that card should be that cheap. And it comes back a second, and they're like, yeah, I'm not playing this in Standard anymore.
Yep.
And then it starts to see, wow, it's still really good in Modern, and a bunch of people want to buy this card. And then after Modern, this slow decline of, people are like, well, I'm not going to bother selling it if it's not worth any money, but they do.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, I can play this in Vintage, Legacy, and Commander.
Yep.
So you see it's slow, this slow trickle from, and again, now I'm looking at the borderless Oko, got down to 21 and is at 35 right now.
Oh yeah. Brady says it's often played in Vintage as well. That's correct. You're actually right. They do splash that in, for example, one of the top finishing decks recently in Vintage. Remember how I was telling you they're getting more efficient with the Moxen that they're using?
Yep.
Speaking of efficiency, in this fish style deck, the different style of fish you would expect from a Vintage deck, what are they rocking? They're rocking Oko in their deck because it's just so powerful, man. It's very, very powerful. I think I meant to say that about Uro in Vintage. That's. I think they're playing Uro. It's too much.
Here's
more.
one Uro. Actually, the most played card in Vintage
yes,
right now.
There is one. I take them. Holy shit.
Tarmogoyf, but and Archon of Emeria, Collector Oof.
Yeah, I think those are the cards right there. Like the disruptive cards are the ones that you see a lot more of in Vintage. I mean, there's so many more efficient ways to get rid of the graveyard.
We're starting to get sloppy in our way through this announcement. But in Legacy, besides Oko, they did ban 2 other cards. The one that said your mana's perfect always, do whatever you want. Arkham's Astrolabe.
Oh yeah.
Finally, not too good for Legacy.
Yeah, that's pretty busted. Well, it goes along with what we were saying last week. There comes a point where why wouldn't you just run all Snowlands in your deck when you have cards like this out there?
Yeah.
And there's no hate for snow cards. Like, That card was a little too far right there. A
And
little
one
too
of
far.
one of the first cards that we talked about on this cast over a year ago, Dreadhorde Arcanist. We really thought this was going to go big in newer formats, but it turns out having a format that is based on Ponder, Preordain, Brainstorm,
Yep.
Thoughtseize.
Well, we were saying that. We were saying that about this card, and it was basically because of how much it was showing up in Legacy and bringing back decks that had kind of been forgotten
That's
about.
true.
Like Canadian Threshold. Before they printed Dreadhorde Arcanist, Canadian Threshold was a thing of the past, or Rug Delver. It was kind of a thing of the past. Dreadhorde Arcanist was out, and they're like, oh, okay.
I get to cast all these again?
I get mad value off my 1-drop mana spells now. So as soon as I saw that, as soon as I saw this card basically single-handedly, granted there's been more printings of other busted cards for Rug Delver since, but when I saw that, I said, this card's busted. And, you know, they finally agreed in Legacy. But even if the price hasn't skyrocketed through the roof, we at least got on the value of that card very early. And it may suggest this may also be something, especially where the price hasn't really skyrocketed. Let this be a sign to you how busted Dreadhorde Arcanist is. And the fact that it's still probably $1 or $2. It's banned in Legacy.
Right. And this is a card that I would say let's watch this one and see if the Legacy banning even impacts the price at all.
I can almost guarantee you it probably didn't.
Well, and I don't think we're going to see it today because that just happened.
Yep.
But like, let's come back and look at it next week and see if there's any price volatility
for sure
from that banning.
But I mean, even so, let's roll with the assumption that it probably won't affect it, right? The chart right here, you can see we'll show it to everybody here. You can see that the price of Dreadhorde Arcanist has been starting to move since late this summer. And I think it's a slow catch-on to exactly what we're talking about and exactly what we called out many months ago, that this card is so powerful. It's so broken. It can bring back Rug Delver and Legacy.
It's got an ear to the street.
It's got an ear to the streets. It's got an ear to the streets for those 1-drop cards that it can recast. I mean, you've been on the receiving end of a Dreadhorde Arcanist in Modern.
Yep.
Even in Modern. It's demoralizing.
Thoughtseize, swing at you, Thoughtseize you again.
Oh, yuck.
I just for some reason looking at this now is the first time that it ever made me go, huh. If I put a sword on this, I could collected company.
Well, you could collected company with a sword, right? But is it its toughness?
It's its power.
Yeah, okay, power. Yeah.
So if you put a 3/3 sword on it.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you need an equipment. Yep.
I'm just saying, people joked when this first came out that Become Immense, if you Become Immense this and then swing, it has enough power to cast Become Immense for free.
Oh my God. I didn't even think of that. That's hilarious. So that's just cute.
It is just cute.
That's just cute.
But it also gets there.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
So, but she banned now, bitch.
Yeah, but again, I think this should be, the investors of this, right? The opportunistic buyers should instead take this Legacy banning as a sign of how powerful this card is. And it's only banned in Legacy right now. It's only banned in Legacy. Will it be banned in formats in the future, such as Historic, Pioneer, Modern, maybe? I could see it happening. Because it's got that ear to the streets. It's listening. It's just listening for a busted 1-drop spell to be printed in those formats. That's demoralizing.
So we talked a little bit about Vintage. Vintage has a lot of restricted cards, but really, in the modern era, Vintage has only ever had 1 card banned. And it's unbanned.
Oh man. It's so funny. If you go through and you look at the actual ban list of Vintage, it's rather laughable. They've actually summed it up into categories to make it simple for you. And if you just take the categories apart, right? And you just say, okay, forget the categories. Yeah, those are obviously banned, like the conspiracy cards and the anti cards and the manual dexterity cards. If you take those out, there's no banned cards.
Except for Luris. until
now, right?
and Luris is back. Meat's back on the menu, boys.
I think they finally noticed that. They were like, if you take out these categorized cards, there's really no banned cards in Vintage. I mean, they've been averse to it because it all rolls on this assumption: Black Lotus is legal.
Well, yes, but here's the thing: Luris is now a 6-mana card.
Yes. Rules have changed significantly.
So they didn't just decide that Luris was okay for Vintage. They said 6-mana Luris is okay for Vintage.
Infinitely better for Vintage. But yeah, Vintage is like the Wild West. It is the final frontier. Like if a card gets banned in Vintage, and you will hear me say this right here, this is just a blanket rule, okay, for figuring out the busted level of a card. And if you should buy it, if a card is banned in Vintage and it's not banned in any other formats besides Vintage or Legacy, you should probably get that card. It's pretty busted. I think Luris is still a really good card. It's still used in Modern. It's got an ear to the streets, right? As all good cards should that are worthy. I will say I'm not aware of the price of this off the top of my head.
Me neither. I haven't thought about it in a while.
Yeah, and I think probably a lot of people haven't, right? But if it is pretty dirt cheap, it can't hurt to just get a place out of these, have them in your back pocket. Like, it's was on the radar for Vintage. It's still usable. The companion rule change did kind of nerf it quite a bit. Is that the real price?
Of course, I'm looking at the extended art. Show everybody.
Show our awesome.
I wish I could do that with a keystroke. That'd be great.
Yeah, we could probably set them to hotkeys or something.
So it's interesting. It looks like after the unbanning, it did jump, but I think that's hype.
Yeah,
I think that's people thinking, oh, well, no, everybody's going to run this in Vintage.
Yeah.
No.
Until they realize Vintage and Legacy do not affect the card prices.
They don't affect the card prices. And if, again, without the rules change, I think it might have. I don't think it would double the price overnight. This is a hype spike for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
To go from $51 to $127 in a couple of days, that's a hype spike.
Yeah.
And it's already trending back down. But Luris even seems like an interesting commander to me.
Very interesting. Interesting.
You don't have to fulfill the companion requirement to actually have this as your commander. 3-drop that lets you play 2 drops once a turn from your graveyard.
And also that is it always has a discounted price, right? So if it's can you do that from the command zone? Like, can you utilize the companion? Oh, you can't. Okay, never mind. But even so, 3 mana, then it instantly gets around that. Like, you can instantly cast it from the command zone. Hell, I mean, as the game goes on, it might even be worth 5 mana bringing this guy down. It's still cheaper than what it would be, otherwise. So it's still not a bad commander card. But yeah, just keep that blanket rule in mind. Like, whenever Vintage has its eyes on something, whenever Legacy's got its eyes on something, like, hey, this is busted.
Probably more powerful than other formats deserve.
For sure. And, so think about that with, now that Oko's banned in there too. I guess that was coming, but at the same time, we're running out of formats for that one. But still, that card, pending any ban in Commander, might be worth still picking up. As it approaches below $20, if this
Which card,
the Oko. Thief of Crowns too, just something to keep your eye on.
I don't think the Legacy ban is going to tank the price again.
Yeah.
I think just look at it over the next 2 weeks, pick up a copy for Commander. The last thing on this sheet, because we're at 55 minutes, brother.
Holy.
There was a rule change to Cascade, Valky, Tibalt. 2 mana Tibalt broke WotC. They had to change the rules of the game.
Yeah.
So that Cascade just does exactly what you think Cascade should do.
Yeah.
Without shenanigans.
Yeah. It was a good change.
It checks the CMC of the spell to make sure that it's legal, and then it checks it again on resolution. So can you Cascade into this? Is it less CMC than is the card less CMC? Yes. Go to cast it. Is the spell less CMC? Yes. Okay.
Yep.
So not a big deal. And again, I don't understand where they knew they were going to do that, why they thought they had to ban Tybalt's Trickery in Modern. Hopefully we see that unbanned, because I think that card does do cute things.
Very
with
cutesy
things like Rule of Law.
I think especially whereas they got rid of Simeon's Spirit Guide, it was odd for them to ban Trickery too. It was very
They
odd.
changed the rule. They got rid of SSG. They got rid of the monkey. Why would they get rid of a card that they only printed 5 days ago? But if you were playing Jeskai Time Raveler in Modern, Tybalt's Trickery is a counterspell. If you're playing Rule of Law, Tybalt's Trickery is a counterspell. It seems like a fun card if you take out the other things that made it broken.
True, but I mean, I suppose in those decks, they're probably just running legit counterspells if they got Teferi on there too, right? Like,
oh yeah, I mean,
but
they've got blue, they've got real counterspells. But here's the thing: what do you have? You don't have counterspell. You have Negate and Essence Scatter and Dovin's Veto.
True.
If you have Teferi Time Raveler out, Tybalt's Trickery is counterspell.
Or also, I mean, if you got real tricky, right? If you got real next level, you could actually just throw Teferi in your busted Cascade deck and make it some sort of viable thing, and you just happen to have that as a counterspell backup. But hold my beer, let me do this, and you can't interact with it. We're just gonna go get an Emrakul now.
The last thing that I wanted to talk about today were some reprints coming out in the Black is Magic Secret Lair that's on sale right now. There are some sick art on some sick cards here. Every one of these is a Commander staple.
Got a Black History Month, paying homage to Black History Month here. We've got a Magic is Black, or Black is Magic. Black is Magic set dropping. Pretty sweet cards in it too.
February 22nd through March 31st. So this is a full week one, which they don't always do. Shalai, Voice of Plenty. That's probably my least favorite art out of this set. But all of these are full art, available in either foil or non-foil. They have a Shalai, Voice of Plenty, a Ponder that looks wicked cool, Cultivate that looks really cool, where the two kids are actually cultivating a Black Lotus.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Kaya, Ghost Assassin, that was a stupidly expensive foil that was only available in Conspiracy Take the Crown. 5 mana Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and people are calling this Teferi Family of Dominaria because it's Teferi and Niambi and what's his wife's name? I'm going to actually cheat and try and look at a vintage deck. Oh no, it wasn't Lavinia. Anyway.
Yep.
Niambi's the daughter. I know that. But
that's dope.
It's his whole family. And then this crazy looking Soul Ring.
One of the best arts of Soul Ring they've ever done right here, for sure.
Oh man, if this wasn't a taco, that Soul Ring in foil, Jason Clark, digging that Soul Ring.
Yup. That's gonna look real good in foil, dude.
It's gonna look so good in foil.
Those glowy eyes.
I'm just afraid that it's gonna, make my deck look like it's popping a stiffy because it's gonna be lumped over.
Oh, yeah, right.
And Path of Ancestry, another Commander staple card.
Very good reprint there. I like that. It was really odd. I didn't notice that was a land at first. I was like, I thought for whatever reason it was the other card. The other card that sounds like it's Path of Bravery is what I thought it was at first. But then I read it. I was like, oh, it's a land. Oh, wait. It doesn't look at all like a land from the art. I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. I get it. I love that card, though. I love that it got reprinted. I'm not a huge fan of the art on that one. But
so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards in this secret lair. Non-foil is $40. Foil is $50. They are making a portion of this a donation to Black Girls Code, which is specifically a group that helps go into areas and help teach young women of color STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math.
That's cool.
Skills and programming specifically. So it's a pretty good cause. And I mean, I hate to say it, and I feel like you can say this about a lot of secret layers, but when it's something this particular, this unique, there's no way that this $50 secret layer isn't worth a $100 bill in a year.
I mean,
Like-
we've seen it with some secret layers before, right? We were just talking before the cast, like look at the Walking Dead secret layer and even some of the cards in it already.
Yeah.
As much as people wanted to complain about it coming out, oh, this is blah blah blah. Yeah, well, you can't complain about the price, man. Like now, I bet you wish you bought it.
Yeah. I'm just looking up something because I want to see if it's listed on here. Okay, so just by way of comparison, right now people are pre-selling on TCG Player the Secret Lair Drop Series Seb McKinnon Damnation. The foil of that one card at $50 pre-sale. Now,
Wow.
these pre-sale prices always tank when the card comes out. But, if you got this whole kit for $40 and could sell the Damnation for $50,
It's pretty good.
it's pretty good.
Pretty good.
Granted, I'm going to do it the other way and sell the other cards and keep the Damnation, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Seb McKinnon also is running a Kickstarter right now where you can, for
Jason Clark agrees with you.
yeah, exactly. The whole reason I got it was for the Damnation. I know it's going to tank the price of my Judge Foil Damnation, but
Yeah.
I want to have one of these. Anyway, Seb McKinnon's Kickstarter will let you get this art on a playmat. Limited print run. Only people that were involved in the Kickstarter can get the playmat. So if you really like these, the Damnation or any of these Seb McKinnon arts from that drop, go over to Kickstarter and search for Seb McKinnon.
100%. So
Crazy shit. That's the biggest or the third biggest BNR ever. Shakeups, five or six cards in multiple formats.
crazy, man. This is the power
Nobody's
creep right
even
here.
playing them.
This is the power creep right here. You can't deny it anymore, Wizards. You're getting too big for your britches with some of these sets.
Again, looking at the names of the list here, Omnath printed in months, Uro printed in months, Teferi Time Rabbit printed in a year, Uro printed in months, Wilderness Wreck printed within the year, Field of the Dead printed within the year, Mystic Sanctuary printed within the year, Tybalt's Trickery printed within the month, Uro printed within the year, Astrolabe printed since last summer, Arcanist printed within a year, Oko printed within a year, Luris. Everything that's on this list, except for the two randos from Gate Crash and the Monkey.
Yep. Printed pretty recently, man.
Simeon Spirit Guide. Thanks, Brady. You too.
Thanks for joining us, man. Appreciate you.
As always, you've been listening to the SnapCast podcast with Michael Cooley and Brad O'Brien. If you haven't already, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and tell your friends. And if you prefer to listen to your podcast on audio, you can download us wherever you do that, so you can listen to us on your drive to work if you don't work from home. Like I don't have time to listen to a podcast walking downstairs from my bed in the morning.
Jam us in your car. Listen to us, and as we
Jam us,
always...
slam us, Alabamas.
Alabamas. Anyways, guys, hey, thanks so much for watching. And as always, spread the podcast, and not the plague.